Hannibal Lecter, doctor, psychiatrist, psychopath. Still at large, more than 10 years after his escape from a maximum security mental hospital. Still wanted in connection with at least 13 murders. And for all we know, still hungry.
You're talking about a person that is driven by psychological forces that do not impact normal people.
On tonight's program, we find the chilling truth about the multiple murderer known as Hannibal the Cannibal, the man at the center of the hit movie The Silence of the Lambs, and the eagerly anticipated follow-up, Hannibal, the world's most notorious serial killer, captured on film. In 1988, the notorious serial killer Dr. Hannibal Lecter, dubbed Hannibal the Cannibal by the tabloid press, escaped from custody, killing 3 police officers and a paramedic in the process. Dr. Lecter's dramatic escape marked the end of almost a decade of incarceration. Much of it spent in solitary confinement following his equally dramatic arrest by the Maryland State Police in 1979. Since his escape seen here by security cameras at Shelby County Courthouse, nothing has been heard from Dr. Lecter, save from a single phone call made to a serving FBI officer.
I have no plans to call on you, Clarice. The world's more interesting with you in it. So you take care now to extend me the same courtesy.
Police and federal agents across the globe continue to search for clues, but despite reported sightings in several countries, Dr. Lecter remains at large. The details of Hannibal Lecter's early life remain something of a mystery. In many ways, we know only what Dr. Lecter wants us to know. Lecter is believed to have been born in Europe, possibly one of the Balkan countries, during the early part of the Second World War, fleeing to the United States as a child. After graduating with honors from medical school, he spent much of the late 60s and early 70s studying for his PhD. After a brief but eventful internship at Maryland General Hospital, he switched fields from practical medicine to clinical psychiatry. Here in a small private practice, the eminent psychiatrist embarked upon the career which would make him famous, and the killing spree which would make him infamous.
Lecter, being more intellectual, more, really genius level, being able to get through medical school into field psychiatry, I think that's the only place he would want to go, to use all of that information, all of that knowledge for all the wrong reasons, which in fact he did.
Behavioral scientist Robert K. Ressler, author of several best-selling books about the criminal mind, was one of the original FBI agents who profiled Dr. Lecter prior to his capture.
Dr. Lecter certainly goes way beyond the traditional serial killer. I would say he transcends the normal, if there is such a thing as normal characteristics of a person who kills multiply. I would initially look at him as what I would call an organized offender. You're not dealing with a man who is driven by psychotic fantasy. You're not dealing with a man who is not aware of right and wrong. He is very well aware of right and wrong. He knows how to stay out of harm's way. He knows how to stay out of the clutches of law enforcement. So you're dealing with an individual with Hannibal Lecter, a person who is far above and beyond in his capabilities, his intellect, and his ability to get away with his crimes. And you have to look for things that would not be normal in a normal investigation of a serial killer.
Lecter selected his victims carefully and used a variety of methods which made linking the murders almost impossible. After killing his victims, the qualified physician would cut them open with surgical precision, often feeding on parts of the body. Robert Ressler and fellow criminologist Dr. Christy Kokonas struggled to piece together a profile of the killer in an effort to discover a motive behind the madness.
People look at his behavior and say, well, he must be crazy. Look at the things that he did to other people. This can't be normal. This person must be suffering from a grave mental illness. Because psychiatry has not caught up with understanding why people are motivated to do these things. He could be classified as a psychopath in that he is able to lie and con and manipulate other people very well.
You're looking for something that the average person just can't understand. The power, the control, the way an individual manipulates his victim, keeping their life in balance in his hands, and taking their life as he sees it is very, very gratifying to these individuals.
He is able to use people as if they are objects. He doesn't have feelings of guilt or remorse. He doesn't feel anxious when he lies or does things that may be particularly cruel or sadistic, that actually these are things that feed his ego and help him to feel more powerful.
In all, 9 individuals are known to have fallen prey to Dr. Lecter prior to his capture. Among them was Benjamin Raspail, a flautist with the Baltimore Symphonium, who was later found dead with his thymus and pancreas missing.
Well, my name is Jonathan Hofberg, and I held the presidency of the Baltimore Philharmonic Orchestra from 1972 to 1995, which is when I retired.
In 1975, Hofberg was one of the guests at a dinner given by Lecter the night after Raspail's disappearance. Detectives believe the organs found missing from Raspail's body may have been served at the dinner.
The police wanted to know the contents of the menu which Lecter had served at the dinner, because Raspail had been found with, because of what happened to Raspail.
How did you feel when you found out about...
I couldn't eat anything after I found out. I started to drink to avoid eating, I suppose.
More than 20 years later, Jonathan Hofberg still suffers with his eating disorder. Hofberg was one of the few who got close to Dr. Lecter who lived to tell the tale.
This type of monster is far more frightening than the visible one, because in fact he comes across as so normal, and yet his crimes are so abnormal that people have a difficult time to comprehend that, and oftentimes you'll see a great deal of denial.
Even those who witnessed the aftermath of Lecter's crimes, like former police officer Bobby Stewart, would never be the same again. Stewart was one of the officers who raided Hannibal Lecter's basement, which contained many grisly mementos of his murders.
At the time, I think that we were all just, caught up in the thrill of finally catching the guy. And I hadn't been in the force more than a couple of months, and I could hardly believe my luck that I was going to be involved in this big raid. There was going to be in all the papers, you know. That was before we didn't know what we was going to find.
Stewart, then a rookie officer in his early 20s, could not escape the terrible memories of the raid on Lecter's basement, and retired from the force soon afterwards due to severe emotional problems.
Well, we all got offered counseling, you know, but you don't. I'd only been on the force a short while, as I said, so you don't want to appear that you can't take it, you know?
Stewart now runs a motel in Southern California. He's not heard from Dr. Lecter since his escape. Not all of those who knew Dr. Lecter felt his influence to be malign, however.
I was a patient of Dr. Lecter's for several months. And he really helped me. You know, he changed my life.
While not exactly condoning his activities, Penny believes that Lecter deserves to be treated with sympathy, or at least understanding.
After Dr. Lecter was arrested, he got a lot of attention. Pretty much all negative, I admit it. Okay, but you know, this cannibal thing, I think that was really exaggerated. I gotta say that meeting Dr. Lecter was probably the best thing that ever happened to me.
Another of those who knew a very different Dr. Lecter was his former cleaning lady, Meredith Grundy, who lived a few doors down from Dr. Lecter's private practice.
Oh, I thought he was lovely. He was so polite. He was always kind. He was always considerate. And he was always so well turned out.
It was Lecter's 6th victim, Alexander Blair, which ultimately led to his arrest. Blair was mutilated, stabbed with arrows, and left hanging from the wall in a pose eerily reminiscent of a drawing from an early medical textbook. It soon emerged that Dr. Lecter had treated the man 5 years previously while working as an intern for a Baltimore hospital.
Now, there was an old wound on the individual that led Will Graham to the doctor that attended that wound, and that turned out to be Hannibal Lecter. Graham was sophisticated enough and perceptive enough to recognize a series of books and got into them to see wound patterns that were in that book that now were on a subject of a murder, and of course these two things linked directly into Dr. Lecter. Now that alone, on its own merit, would not be enough to take to court. But the fact is that Lecter went after Graham and cut him up with a knife would reinforce Will Graham's ideas about the connection that were almost his last revelations.
Following his arrest by Maryland State Police and the FBI, Dr. Lecter was charged on 9 counts of first-degree murder. If found guilty, Dr. Lecter was certain to face the electric chair. Cameras were forbidden in the courtroom where Dr. Lecter appeared in his own defense, amid some of the highest security ever seen during a trial. For 10 days, jurors listened in horror as Dr. Lecter's appalling catalog of crimes was described in chilling detail. Despite overwhelming public opinion that Dr. Lecter should be put to death, the presiding judge ordered psychiatric reports suggesting that Dr. Lecter was criminally insane and therefore not responsible for his actions.
These people will never stop because it is part of their pathology, but because we don't understand it very well, we tend not to know what to do with these people. But in terms of Dr. Lecter being criminally insane and not knowing the nature of his acts, that's not true. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was in complete control at all times. He's sociopathic and sadistic. He's not insane.
In the summer of 1980, he was committed to the maximum security wing of a Baltimore hospital. The multiple murderer had escaped the death sentence. Soon, he would escape custody.
They tried to convict him, but on the other hand, they couldn't convict him because he had an insanity plea. He had an escape some way out. He knew the way out through the system.
What has happened, the fact is that apparently a judge has deemed him not capable of standing trial because of his state of mind, I think was contrived. I think he organized the judge's opinion that he was not fit to stand trial, and that's again part of his brilliance.
He knew what he was doing, but he played the system like he was crazy, like he was insane.
Within a year of his committal, on July 8, 1981, Hannibal Lecter attacked his next victim, a nurse who turned her back on her patient for a moment.
On the afternoon of July 8th, Hannibal Lecter complained of chest pains and was taken to the dispensary. His mouthpiece and restraints were removed. When the nurse leaned over him, well, the wounds were horrific. Doctors managed to reset her jaw, more or less, save one of her eyes. His pulse never got above 85, even when he ate her tongue.
In the weeks following the attack, security was increased still further. But in 1988, the FBI offered to transfer Dr. Lecter to a more favorable environment in return for his cooperation in the hunt for another serial killer known as Buffalo Bill. While awaiting his transfer in a holding cell at Shelby County Courthouse, Dr. Lecter escaped, brutally killing 3 officers in the process. At Baltimore Police Headquarters, flags were flown at half-mast as a mark of respect for the dead officers. Dr. Lecter has not been seen since his escape. In 1991, the events leading up to Lecter's escape became the basis for Jonathan Demme's acclaimed feature film, The Silence of the Lambs, starring Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
The film became an international box office phenomenon, subsequently winning 5 Oscars, including Best Actor, Best Director, and Best Picture. Understandably, the film led to much speculation about Lecter's whereabouts and raised his public profile to a degree where recapture seemed almost inevitable. Today, Dr. Lecter continues to elude his pursuers. A few believe he's managed to evade capture by curbing his murderous instincts. Those who studied him, however, feel that this is extremely unlikely.
People that are serial murderers are driven by certain deviant fantasies that they have. And it's not as if he has this psychological need met with killing 1 victim or 5 victims, that the pathology involved is such that it doesn't stop. It's an integral part of who he is and how he functions.
Dr. Kokonas believes that it's not that Lecter is no longer committing his heinous crimes, but that he's simply become more skilled at concealing them.
I think that's the most frightening aspect of his pathology, is that there's nothing that someone can do to prepare, to prevent being a victim of someone like Dr. Lecter, that his pathology is such that he's able to be very charming and to present like the man next door, like a nice colleague, a helpful neighbor. There's nothing you can do to prepare or prevent this from happening.
Indeed, it appears that Dr. Kokonas may be correct. In a surprise move early last year, after years in which Dr. Lecter's trail appeared to have gone cold, he was, without explanation, suddenly returned to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list.
The FBI has a program called the Top 10 program that will aid in the capture of this individual.
Incredibly, a few days later, after years of silence, an FBI operative, Special Agent Clarice Starling, received a chilling message from Dr. Lecter himself.
I couldn't help noticing on the FBI's rather dull public website that I have been hoisted from the Bureau's archives of the common criminal and elevated to the more prestigious 10 Most Wanted list. Is this coincidence, or are you back on the case? If so, goody goody.
It was this apparent reawakening of Dr. Lecter that inspired veteran producer Dino De Laurentiis and Ridley Scott, acclaimed director of Alien, Thelma and Louise, and Gladiator, to return to this unique character, last seen on the big screen in Silence of the Lambs.
Well, Hannibal has now been free for 10 years, and I just thought that would be a really fascinating character study.
Making the multi-million-dollar movie would not be easy. Piecing together Hannibal's recent movements would be a time-consuming task.
Sightings are very common. People all over the world will call in and say, I saw Hannibal in Bangkok, I saw him in China, I saw him here, there, and everywhere. And a lot of these things are ghost sightings.
Trying to unearth such a dark character, that's the hardest part.
Lecter's trail would lead Scott and his team all over the world.
A person like Dr. Lecter, of course, with his sophistication, his intelligence, his financial resources, the world is his playground. I think it would be virtually impossible for the average person to spot the characteristics that make him so dangerous.
If you met him, you would never know. You would never have an inkling of what you were dealing with. It's very scary.
After years of meticulous research based on the original work Hannibal by Silence of the Lambs author Thomas Harris, the movie was eventually scripted by David Mamet and Steve Zalian, and Sir Anthony Hopkins would return to his Oscar-winning role as Dr. Hannibal Lecter.
I'd actually never worked with Anthony Hopkins before, but clearly he's one of those virtuosos of this business, and I knew at some point I had to work with him.
For years, people were talking about a sequel, and I say, oh, yeah. I believe that when I'm standing in front of the camera.
Camera, and action!
So it's a bit of a surprise to think that we are doing it again.
The latest information now available has traced Dr. Lecter to Florence, Italy, and psychological profiling has helped establish Lecter's likely actions there.
It's inconceivable that a person that would have done the 9 murders of Dr. Lecter would hang up his coat and say, well, I'm out of the business, I'm retiring. It just doesn't happen.
In Florence, I wanted to play him as a a man who's bored by his retirement. Suddenly he hears that, they're after him again. He thinks, good, back into action.
FBI agent Clarice Starling, who worked closely with Dr. Lecter to catch notorious serial killer Buffalo Bill, was played by Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs. This time, the role falls to two-time Oscar nominee Julianne Moore.
Comparisons are inevitable, and of course there are going to be some, there's some apprehension about it because Jodie was really, really fantastic. She won an Academy Award for the role. But it's a different movie, so I'm delighted that I've been given the opportunity, and I can only hope that I'll do as well as she did.
You're trying to catch him yourself, aren't you? For the reward. I cannot warn you strongly enough against that. He killed 3 policemen down in Memphis while in custody, tearing the face off one of them, and he will kill you too.
Agent Starling's once celebrated career has taken a few wrong turns since her last encounter with Dr. Lecter. Indeed, she was still working on the street until Hannibal's recent reappearance.
Any agent who's still functioning in action on the street is doing a very dangerous job.
The stalling of Agent Starling's career has been the focus of some media attention. Director Ridley Scott has his own theories.
She's actually got herself into trouble. The politicians need a scapegoat, and Starling is the scapegoat.
Controversially, Scott's movie lays much of the blame for Agent Starling's persecution on FBI Bureau Chief Paul Krendler, played by Ray Liotta.
So I take it you've seen the coverage in the papers and on television?
I have nothing to do with the news, Mr. Krendler.
The woman had a baby in her arms. There are pictures. You could see the problem, I would think.
Not in her arms, in a carrier across her chest. In her arms, she had a MAC-10.
It's long been rumored that Krendler opposed Agent Starling's reappointment to the Lecter case. Also bound to cause trouble is Scott's assertion that this is due to the fact that he's been supplying information on Lecter to Lecter's only surviving victim, billionaire Mason Verger, played in the movie by Gary Oldman.
Gary was the last one to get cast, and I figured it needed somebody who wouldn't play up so much the horror, because the horror is there on the face.
But as more details of the search for Lecter emerge, Scott came to focus ever more deeply on the unique relationship that appears to have developed between Clarice Starling and Hannibal Lecter.
Is this Clarice? Well, hello, Clarice. I'm afraid I have bad news for you. He has fun with her, teases her, torments her. Are you paying attention to me, ex-Special Agent Starling?
For the cast and crew alike, Hannibal offered an irresistible opportunity to bring one of the most famous movie villains of all time back to the big screen.
I'm giving very serious thought to eating your wife.
He's simply a force of nature. He likes it that way. He enjoys it.
He tends to be slightly superhuman. I think he likes to live right on the edge of the razor. Has no fear.
Maybe we love to look into that dark pit and see how it, the person in there, see how he ticks. I found people going between covering their faces going, oh God, but still watching between their fingers.
Now, as audiences await Hannibal the movie, Dr. Hannibal Lecter is still at large and still dangerous.
Have you ever met a psychopath? You may never know.